Well, if because people can really like show them how to do, and then show that it's better in 50 years. Well, so far,
You ready? Okay, great. Everyone, are you ready? Yeah. So you're going to each one report? Yes. Okay, then we can. That's right. We just turn it around. Can we start to make the presentations? Your presentations. So maybe we start with the industry. Who wants to present, or all of you?
We'll kind of switch around.
Okay, great. But just to explain, maybe we get your inputs, and then I would respond a bit, and then give you just an introduction of how our standard actually look like. And the industry is, I think, the most complex one, because it's the whole value chain, and you are like 6 to 10 different interest groups. So I'm very curious, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe before we start answering the questions, just to clarify how we approached this, is that we divided the industry into the up and the downstream to look at the different interests, because there are several, I don't know if I should call them sectors, but groups that are interested in very different things. The two of us, we were looking at the upstream, so from the moment we get the seeds to processing them, and we figured out that according to your research, your statistics, first of all, our interest is to do money, because we are a company, we are an industry, but we make money if we have high demand for what we're producing. And according to your statistics, there is a high demand in Europe for non-genetically modified soya beans, so that would be within our interest as well. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. No.
So basically for seed companies, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry?
To the downstream part, the upstream. So just representing, so to say, the downstream, like Rewe, as you said. So we would ask our customers what they would like to have, and then I could create a demand from that side, and I'm reporting it then up to the upstream part so that they can make a business plan and see what they can do.
How do you ask the consumers, or what is the approach to ask them?
Well, they are the standard ways. You ask them when they go to the Rewe shop, and then they are asked what they would like to have, and that is a very standard way Rewe is doing, or others also, to find out which types of products they would like to have. And from that study, you create your business plan, and then you make sure that you get the substance in before. So it's always from the upstream to the downstream, and then the information goes back again, so that every industry partner within the value chain can make its own business plan.
Just one last thing to that question. In theory, it seems to be very beneficial to have that industry. And I think we know that there is some demand. We're not sure of how much, and that's why we would do these questionnaires maybe. But the other thing is also, we touched on to at the end of our discussion, that you could then also create the demand, so that advertisement, for example, could be a key for actually making more people aware of the problem. Because we looked at Europe, and I think we were a bit focused on Germany and said, yes, there is an interest for non-GMO soya beans, but then Europe really is big, and there are other parts where it looks quite different. So we agreed that advertisement would be a key aspect as well.
Well, it's difficult maybe to kind of report you back. Is first that a lot of consumers don't even know that the food, the meat is the soybean inside. So there's a lot of campaigning and a lot of information done. So when you ask consumers, they might like, why soya? What? I don't really understand. So this is a tricky one. And then the second really important issue of them is the whole sustainable reports. So for retailers, for example, it's very important that they can say that they have a CSR report where they do something, not only about the report because they really want to do something, of course, and want to improve a bit. And then the third one is that they're, of course, also very price sensitive. So they when they report in our standard, at one hand, they want to have a really strict standard and a quality system which is sure that there's no bashing, there's no problem, there's no negative reputation, but at the same time, don't make it too expensive, because then they go to other supermarkets or they buy maybe from other countries. Yeah.
Just one example. Rewe, for example, they have just started a program in Allgäu, in south of Germany. We all know the problem with the milk. And they ask farmers by contract to make sure that for 5 years they would get non-genetically modified material to feed the cows and an end. And they are prepared to pay a much higher price for that. So that's always then the question, how are my customers prepared to have for a certain quality also a higher price? If it's the same, you are totally right, then the customer goes, unfortunately, always to the cheapest one.
Yeah.
But fortunately, local production and other items, which nowadays are discussed quite heavily, they make already a change. So a couple of years ago, that was not the case, but it starts more and more. So the milk is quite a nice example.
Yeah.
Or locally grown eggs or whatever.
Yeah.
So that would be then a similar part. And perhaps just to add about the compromises, or we said again, according to the value chain, there are different time scales. So what you could do immediately is for us as the downstream part to buy material non-genetically modified and then to start selling the product. But then with a longer time scale, you start then convincing the farmers how to do it. And what you also could, at a quicker stage, do the production, what you said before, to have local production and processing of the raw soy material. That is something which needs another 1, 2, 3 years, but you can already start quite quick. And the longest it takes to convince the farmers to get, at the end of the day, your nice picture, 99.9% of your own consumption being then European soya, I guess. So that was another question I had. Yeah. Not only Donau soya, but at the end of the day, Europe soya.
Thank you. Thank you. Done?
No, if you want to ask anything, we've said what we wanted to say, basically.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we need to be faster, cool. Yeah. Because we have only half an hour. Maybe the NGOs want to be next. Thank you for the input.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
So we also had a pretty wide range of interests that we wanted to represent, and the top of that was non-GMO produced soya. And we also touched on organic, like all the way to organic, which we determined that as far as compromises were concerned, we would not compromise on non-GMOs, but giving a time frame of allowing farms to move towards organic, because that can take some time. You can't just do that immediate. And then one of our other major things was sustainable land use. So making sure these farms that have your label are actually doing crop rotations and have appropriate erosion controls in place and fertilizer controls and things like that. What else do we have?
Yeah, and because GMOs we think is like a very wide, and we are not sure which kind of GMO NGOs we are representing, so it could be many. Sorry, but also we said like we could be interested towards sustainable consumption. So this is not only about the production, but to advocate for consumers to start changing habits. And in that sense, we also wanted to have like to really see in the standard is like transparency in labeling. So it's okay to have a time frame for transition into this standard, but to have it really represented in the labeling, so you can, as a consumer, have all the information to make a decision in the time of the purchase. And we said our goals is also the industry was saying about the price, and we want to advocate in this the creation of the standard to set a pricing system that actually reflects all costs, and then that avoids the problems that other latitudes producing soya already have. So start the standard already with considerations in environmental conditions and labor standards and all of it that could actually reflect, but also that doesn't affect the consumer as much, that is not anymore like an option anymore. Yes.
Great, thank you. Maybe the NGOs are still a very important role in the whole standard process. We consult them all the time, and they're also in the advisory board. They're very important for us to get all the legitimacy and also to get their feedback. And it was kind of what you say with organic. It's more about pesticides in general. So pesticides is a really big issue for them, and they're really pushing also to get some improvements. And this is at the same time on farm level and policy level very important for us to get some achievements. So this is a huge, and also with industry, with the pesticide companies and the seed companies, to get improvements on that side. And then land use is also important. They don't want to have, of course, deforestation in Brazil, in Europe. We also don't want to have that. And social and labor rights was also an input also that they want to have. Of course, that farmers have holidays and all those things to get that. And non-GM was more or less not a discussion. It was clear it's non-GM, and everything else has to be better, because we have in Austria non-GM label, and in Germany there's also non-GM label. So this was kind of, we start from there. Yeah. Good. You are politicians, right? Yeah. Difficult.
So we were the politics and chamber group, and we also, like the other groups, had a very wide and diverse set of interest and stakeholders. And so we kind of divided it into three different interest groups. So looking at global trade agreements, consumers, and then local producers / industry. And maybe I'll just skip to our proposal, because that kind of is more of an aggregate of all the different discussions that we had. And we came up with several different items, and that being, one of them was to maintain a competitive price for producers. We prefer voluntary agreement, so more of public-private partnership. Also, that it complies with the current standards environmentally. Efficiency was a very big thing, and so that kind of also comes in with the cost. So something more efficient in terms of production, and a sound governance structure, and that also falls along with the legitimacy aspect, especially as a politician. If you want to support it, you need to have a certain amount of buy-in for legitimacy, and then a strong soy industry and some amount of independence would be a key aspect for us, and feasibility as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe about the price issue, just to add that I heard it from a lot of groups. This is a very difficult issue, because we as an association, we cannot set any prices. As we have antitrust guidelines. We always read before board meetings and presidium meeting and general assembly to not talk about prices, because this is, because we have Rewe and Aldi and all those sitting in the board, and if they start talking about price, we get some of the problems. And for the politicians, and you said a very important thing is consistent standards. Using consistent standards are implemented already in the country and take them to our standard. This is also very important for us to not create all new, but use things who are existing and then combine them into one label. And one interest also from politicians is, of course, to make it feasible for especially the farmers, because the agriculture ministry is representing the farmers, so they don't want to push farmers to force them to do force. It's a voluntary standard, but they discuss on that level with us. But generally, they think the idea is good. And maybe one also interesting thing is when we talk with the ministry also, and you talk about the CO2 emissions you can save, when you remember the slide I presented you, this 1.1 million, they think it's really good. It's good for if we save 1.1 million CO2 emissions. But what they say is it doesn't count for Austria when we save it because we save it in Brazil. So for the ministry in Austria, it's not something he can take for. He make a good thing because we're saving 1.1 million CO2s in Brazil. Good, but not. Yeah. So he was like, it's good to support, but he was not. We save 1.1 million CO2 emissions. Yeah, farmers.
So we're a bit confused since we don't really have farming experience. But I guess we have more clear interest, maybe divided into smaller farmers and bigger farmers. But otherwise, I think what our interests were is to get this know-how and information, since many of us maybe don't have any experience in soy crop rotation, so we would expect that from being part of the network. And other thing we talked about was this kind of networking and this processing chain, distribution chain, to make sure that our beans would be collected, and especially if we're a small farmer, it might be difficult to get our beans to the market otherwise, so we would need help with that. And as a bigger farmer, we might want help with making an investment plan for processing plant in our own farm, for example, to reduce costs. And that's something we could maybe compromise with, over the years to help get investment for it or make a plan for it. And otherwise, we'd also expect networking, and especially with markets, to make sure that there is a market for our beans, and we just want to get rid of our beans and get money for it. And we also
good money.
Yeah, good money. And also that what we talked about was that beans wouldn't go to waste. So to make sure that depending on the quality of the beans, we would have different markets for it. So for the A-class beans, we could have a contact with tofu making or. But for the lower quality, we could feed them to animals. So to make sure that we just get rid of everything. Yeah,
that's very good input. One thing is just to add is that what farmers not very happy is when you make stricter regulation and don't give them more money for it. So this is something, of course, because we have regulations in our standard, I presented in a minute, pesticides and so on. So they're not very happy to see that. They want to produce as they know how to produce. And then one thing maybe also to add is that when you ask me which farmer you are, I said soybean farmer. But of course there are other farmers who are in that stakeholder group. And basically I forgot them now, and actually you forgot them back then as well, is the farmers who are using the soybeans for their chickens, for example. And we had this big discussion when we introduced pushing also by the retailers, because we asked the retailers and they said, okay, we want to have it. And then the farmers came to us and we're like, this costs more. So they are pig farmers, poultry farmers are super price sensitive. So if they change some, like their feed a bit more expensive, they get less money. This is a very sensitive industry. And at this time we didn't talk before with the laying hen farmers, which we now also didn't do. So maybe to add that. Well, thank you very much. In the research group.
So we were a bit confused at the beginning also what the research can be interested to, and we got some input for you. So the interest of research having not genetically modified seeds in order to make research out of it and exchange them and create seed banks and these kind of things. At the same time, we were more looking at the product, like what you can do with these beans, but what we were saying, feed animals and food production. So I don't know, our mind was constantly going to different fields, and maybe it can be an interest of research, like what can you do of all the different parts. So we also thought about using the shelf of the bean for insulation, building insulation. So maybe research can be interesting also on these issues, but probably one of the main yes, also with the oil we make plastic bags in Vietnam in 10 years. So we're very forward-looking. And then since it's a European project, also researchers would be interesting to see how different climate and different soils could be useful for this production, for the production, and how create a sort of European-wide rotation. So you know that in this time of the year it's better to produce in this part of Europe than in a different kind of the year. So having this kind of networking between producers and that's.
Yep.
Also, that maybe in the Donau area, you could produce the soya beans, but in the mountains where the population is poorer, you could make the factories. Mm-hmm. So that the otherwise, if they make in the rich areas the factories as well, the poor people in the mountains, they will get nothing of it. Mm. So I think it's and the poor people from the mountains. They go away from their little towns and so on. It becomes more and more empty. So they need also work, and I think this would be a good solution to build factories in these areas.
Thank you. Well,
Sorry, it's not really a question. I just thought of when doing research on how does a different climate, different soils influence the growth of soybeans. I remember last week or something, the Fraunhofer Institute here in Freiburg talked about some special kind of solar panels, and they were working with farmers and looking which kind of plants actually grow in shaded areas, so that they can grow things that are low that are low, and then they can have the solar panels above. I just thought of it. It's maybe something that they could do research on as well. That might be a way for the farmers to actually, if it's more expensive, to get money back. Mm-hmm. I just thought of it. That's why. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, the burning calories.
I also wanted to say for the fertilizers, they contain uranium, and the uranium gets into the soil, and of course it gets into the water. And I think the Donau area is very rich with water, and is sort of the water castle, as we say, for probably big regions in Austria, or maybe even Eastern Europe. So I think the Donau Soja has a big responsibility not to put uranium into the soil and into the water. Yeah, it's inside the fertilizer.
Yeah. Yes, uranium. We are concerned about organic production as well, but as we were saying, it's a matter of time frame. So,
well, thank you very much. Research group is a very broad issue, and it links already to farmer level. From the research perspective, it's just to add or to emphasize that due to the very big production of GM, there is a problem for breeders to get seeds. With them they can actually breed and exchange. So this breeder right to exchange seeds is not applicable on GM seeds. So for European breeders and researchers, it was really good for them to have this network of Donau soya to cooperate with each other. So we build up a breeding network already where Serbian breeders and Austrian breeders and German breeders are connecting with each other and changing seeds, changing information and so on. This is was very important for them. And then, of course, other issues like when it's very dry, which seed can we use, which area we use the seeds, of course. We have also on our project Internet of Things. It's how you can use technology on the fields and so on. So it's a very broad issue. Protein content, how much protein do you need to make tofu, and how can you influence that on the seeds and so on. Consumers.
So we just had, basically there was only about 3 major interests that we came up with, and the basic ones were human health and environmental health, and then there was also interest about openness and knowledge about the whole process behind production and why it should be shifted. As far as proposals and what we would want to see, the first ones would be most important, which people have already said before in other groups and other interests and stakeholders, mainly being non-GM production, also being organic or bio, and this kind of goes along with what was just being said, and that would be consumers would want to see little or no pesticide or fertilizer use. And then a final demand or standard that we would want would be a real intensive or active educational and informational campaign, not only about the production, but just about the entire use of soybeans in the whole agricultural scheme, not only for human consumption, but also the implications of soy production for animal feed. We also understood that although consumers have a large interest in price, that the organization couldn't set price, but that another aspect of the educational campaign could be about why these products might cost more, what reasons there are, which stages of production do the costs come from, and then some areas that might be up for compromise is, for example, in the labeling schemes that you might use for the product, there might be leeway in which percentage of feed is being used, like how much is actually soy to be certified as this brand of soy. And then also different types of animals that are appropriate to be labeled as soy fed, because we had talked about some animals it is really not appropriate to feed them soy in the first place. And then also we might compromise to some degree about different fertilizers being used.
Great.
For me, it's important to make information and educational programs. How is the connection between this feeding soy and eating meat? And what how we as a consumer can influence this situation. But we must first understand that it's not worth to substitute the soy from Argentina to European soy, which is maybe bio and non-GM. Then we still have the other problem, what is caused by eating so much meat, and what is happening if there are so much cows and chicken and so on. And we must also understand that, he mentioned it already, that the intestinal system of cows is not made for eating soy and grain or beans or whatever.
Yeah, this is
so it's the main interest and the main how the cow is organized is eating just grass.
Yeah, this is important, because we don't force anyone, of course. This is a program to supplement those who are already using it, not that anyone else is using it who did not use it before. This is one important thing generally after this round. And the second is, of course, that we cannot solve all problems. So this is something people also ask us. We had discussion with NGOs also. We should not use any atom energy. Is that the right word for in English? Atom energy? Nuclear energy in the processing facilities. And we are like, how we can control that? This is our mountain farmers is really difficult for us to then go into all sectors and try to help there. So we point one thing more or less.
But our question was to decide from the consumer
Yeah, no,
side.
it's totally fine.
And
I'm just saying that this is of course a problem we're facing, that we're not on every point we cannot kind of work, but this is totally. Yeah.
Actually, we don't want to have soya.
Well, this is also an education from our side, because soya itself is not bad. And this is, of course, we're discussing all the time, because soya in the situation we're having it now in Brazil and Argentina is bad. But it's not bad if you do it in crop rotation. It's actually a really nice plant if you do it in crop rotation and in a good way. And this is also the goal of our association, also for farmers, to not make monocultures, to not use too much pesticides, to don't make deforestation, but to make it in a crop rotation. So, but since we don't have 10 minutes left, I present you now the standard, and what are we doing? Maybe you can check the presentation afterwards. So these are the core, I'm running now through it. These are what we decided to be our standard. We have origin controlled, so soybeans are only allowed to come from the Danube region. We have non-GM, of course. We have reduced use of pesticides. We have labor and human rights, and we have no development of new agricultural land. And what does that mean in detail? So when you look at origin controlled, when we started, we had to define what is actually the Danube region. And this was also a long process discussion with different stakeholders, because when we started, we had, for example, whole Ukraine, which is absolutely not true, because Danube region is not beyond this border we draw then. So, yeah, so we decided on a list of countries of the Danube River Basin, of the Danube office is in Budapest, and they had this definition. We used this one, and then Europe Soya was 3 years later, when farmers as well as consumers came and say we want to take part of that outside the Danube region. So then we made this Europe map, which is all Europe, and then you can use the Europe Soya label. Then non-GM, we used, of course, we were defining what is actually non-GM, and then using existing regulation to simplify the process, which is the non-GM label from Austria, so this is this one, and the non-GM label from Germany. And this one, this non-GM Danube region standard, we developed together with the German Development Agency and with an organization in Austria to combine the non-GM regulation for the whole eastern region, because we realized that there is no regulation in Serbia, Bosnia, Romania for non-GM, which for us was really challenging, because all the farmers and all the processors had to comply with Austrian law, not law, but with Austrian codex. So we made this non-GM region standard, and now it means that first only varieties who are listed in the EU or in a national catalog, if it's Ukraine, for example, are allowed to use, and then it's a basic inspection and labeling guidelines of AGE, FLOC, and the non-GM Danube region standard.
Is it really just that part with the label? Because
What is
the sign of the label?
Yes?
Is that the one you are using then?
No, we are using this one. But in Austria, most of the products come together with non-GM and Donau soya. And in Germany, some use this one and this one. Yeah. Because the non-GM label in Austria is very good implemented. People know it, they recognize it, so we use it together.
I have a question. Yeah. In Ukraine, they have large areas, I think, with Monsanto or Syngenta. They grow the crop for research. Would that interfere with your non-GMO?
Yeah.
How do you treat that?
Well, in Ukraine, we have about 50% illegal GM cultivation. It's illegal. It's not legal, and therefore
in Ukraine.
Yes, and therefore it's very important to work there. So we open an office there to raise awareness on consumer level, but also on industry level, that they separate the crops when they cultivate non-GM, and that they let them certify with our label, and then they can be sure it's non-GM. And with this awareness raising we're doing in those countries, they use more and more non-GM, because now they just use
the pollen, they fly around.
Yeah, you have to separate, and you have to make an area in between, of course, but you have to educate the people that they know that they're using GM. Sometimes they don't care, or they're not even informed about it. So that's why we are very much on the beginning in Ukraine with that work. Yeah. Then reduced use of pesticide. This is a hot discussion, especially with environmental NGOs, and of course also our aim is to reduce pesticides as much as possible. So first we had this EU legislation when we started, which is not very strict, of course, but for Ukraine and Moldova it is stricter because they have pesticides allowed, we already forbidden. But then from 2016 we forbid to use desiccation. Desiccation is before harvest when you spray mostly glyphosate. So we could fortunately implement that it's now in a whole region forbidden if you do Donau soya or Europe soya to spray glyphosate on the field before harvest. And then at the same time, we establish manuals to promote crop rotation and other use of pesticides. So, for example, we experienced that in some countries, in Eastern European countries, Romania, for example, if there are farmers who are economically richer, so to say, they sometimes use on purpose more pesticides to also show that they have the money to use those pesticides. So this is very important to educate and to raise awareness that it's not necessary to use so much pesticides. And then we do monitoring programs where we test the soya beans if there are heavy metal residues, if there are salmonellas, pesticides, GMs, and so on. So this we do in our supervisory inspections. And then we have the compliance with the labor and human rights. So we had to define the social component, which was also a bit tricky to discuss, and trying to get this fair trade approach also in Europe, because fair trade is actually only working outside of Europe. And so we defined the compliance with the International Labour Organization and the European Union regulations on labor and human rights. And the development of new agricultural land. So we wanted, of course, to prevent that we have a Brazil in Europe, that if we promote soya cultivation, then suddenly we have deforestation, natural areas used for soybeans. So we used this regulation from biodiesel regulation, which say that only agricultural land is allowed to use, which is already agricultural land since 2008. So until 2008, everything what turns into agricultural land afterwards cannot be used for Donau soya. And this is our certification process. So we start from the farm to the end product and certify and inspect the whole value chain. And we have a 3-staged inspection system. So we have, on one hand, the self-monitoring system from the industry by themselves. So they have to prove that, which is already challenging in some countries, is in the eastern part of Europe. Then we have the Donau soya certification in bodies. This is independent certification bodies who are authorized to control and inspect our standard. And they made this first certification and afterwards regulatory inspections. And then we have supervisory inspection done by us. So we are going also then to the industry and checking if everything is correct. This is maybe not too complicated. So what did we reach today? So I just want to present some of our work we did. So first we have our first products since 2013. We have so far eggs which are certified with Donau soya and Hüttaler. It's a program in Austria which is doing a bit like on animal rights and bigger area for animals, and they use Donau soya and regional feed from their own area. Then we have Germany with eggs. We have in Switzerland poultry, and in Serbia we have also eggs now certified with Donau soya. We implemented an IT system where we have a really good traceability until the farm, and we have so far 200 certified partners, which is really important because you have to secure the demand, the supply. So you have to be sure that you can supply the industry. Otherwise, they will not change to Donau soya. Then we have an isotope database where we can prove afterwards if the soybean is really coming from Europe. So you can test afterward. This was a huge project where we took over 650 samples from all over the world to check we did more, of course, in the Danube region to check afterwards and to divide if it's coming from Brazil or from Europe. This is research and innovation as well as knowledge transfer. So we do demonstration fields, we make manuals, how you can, organic soya also, conventional soya, how you should best cultivate soya and to educate farmers. Yeah, and then this is maybe not interested as one of my last slides, is that the production already goes up. So we have, since 2012, when we started from 2.5 million, we have already 8.5 million of production of soybean. This is also due to higher yields. It's not only about the area, because here you can see the area went down because we had a drought in 2015. We had here it was less production than hectares, and here we had less hectares but more yields because more production because we had more yields in 2016. And then we have political support, which is very important. So we have nearly all ministers from the Danube region signing this Danube Soya Declaration, where they say they support the importance of a European sustainable self-supply of soybeans. And I go over that now. We do a lot of events and B2B meetings for our members. We communicate, of course, a lot, and yes, I think. Yeah. Sorry? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. No. I just wanted to ask because we were talking a lot about animal products that you give soy that animals can eat them, that we eat the products. What do you have like direct things for us to feed? Like, do you also give? Are they like Donau soya tofu or soy milk or something?
Unfortunately, not yet, but we're working on that. So we have the first tofu producers, soya milk producers who are entered the association. And we really want to certify food products, soya food products. The problem here is that they are mostly looking for more region. Like in Austria, for example, they write Austrian soybeans. In Germany, they write German soybeans. For them, it's not necessarily to have Donau soya, which is bigger. But we're working on that, of course. Yeah.
Great. Ursula, excellent.
Thank you.
And I know you'll be around today and tomorrow morning, so we can have further discussions. Thanks for your active participation. Lunch will now be served outside, and just for those of you who, because you'll be going somewhere, but we're changing rooms because there seems to be some more participants at the presentations than in the master classes. So after lunch, the master class will be down the hall on the right, and the presentations will be in this room. And if anyone hasn't received a copy of the text of the call